Thank you, everyone. As the voice of God said, I'm Susan O'Brien. I'll be your MC for the afternoon. Before we get started, two quick things. Please continue the conversation on Twitter, at New York IIBN, hashtag NYOPP14. If you pick up any nuggets or gems of wisdom, feel free to fire them out on the Twitter wires. Secondly, there is a very brief short survey. It will take 60 seconds of your time. It's really just to provide feedback on the conference, your overall opinions, and how we can work, in the future to improve, etc. There'll be a link. You actually received the link by email this morning. The final attendee list came with a link to the email, or else you can jump on it right now and do it. So the role of MC is kind of akin to that of a modern-day shepherd, keeping everything together and moving things along. And I am a little scared of Marianne Pierce. So with that said, we're going to get started on time. We have a jam-packed schedule. We're starting with an interview by Irish Times Washington correspondent Simon Carswell with Ronan Ryan, who's Chief Strategy Officer of IEX Group and featured in Flash Boys, A Wall Street Revolt.
Grab any of these?
Yeah, grab that one.
Nice sector.
So hello, everybody. I'm sure the people traipse in after lunch as well. So I'm Simon Carswell. I'm a US correspondent, Washington correspondent with the Irish Times. I'd like to thank the IIBN for inviting me along here, and in particular Sean Gaddy, the chair of the New York branch, to ask me to speak at this event. And I'd also like to thank the network in particular for asking me to interview this guy, Ronan Ryan, who's a great Irishman in New York, co-founder of IEX Trading, the most transparent trading exchange in the US at the moment, and one of the stars of this book, Flash Boys. It's a brilliant book by the great Michael Lewis, author of other super books, Liar's Poker and Moneyball. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Ronan earlier this year for the newspaper and hearing from him firsthand the remarkable story of how Ronan and his colleagues unlocked one of the great secrets of Wall Street. Flash Boys tells the story of high-frequency traders and how American stock markets are rigged in their favour. These are traders who operate in milliseconds, thousands of a second, faster than the blink of an eye, and even microseconds, millionths of seconds. Hence the term Flash Boys. These traders act as financial middlemen, getting between ordinary buyers of stock and the stocks themselves, using the most advanced technology around to profit on the transactions that bear little or no risk to them. The way it works, and Ronan will be able to offer a much better explanation, more user-friendly explanation, is that these traders use the hundreds of millions of dollars they spend on technology to get as close to the traders within the 13 public exchanges and 45 private exchanges known as dark pools. And once they're there, they cover the market. And once they know of a share buyer's intention to purchase a stock, they take advantage of the technology gap between pressing the order button to buy the stock and the purchase of the stock to increase the price and profit on the difference. Ronan here moved here in the US in his teens from Dublin. And he came here through his family, through his father, who got a job at the IDA here in New York. Ronan brought the technical expertise, marrying it with the suspicions of Canadian trader Brad Katsuyama, who was a long-time trader at Royal Bank of Canada and another hero of this book. They both pulled back the curtain on these rather dodgy practices. And Ronan and Brad have set up this new exchange, IEX Trading, and that aims to level the playing field. That's my introduction. Sorry it's not in milliseconds, like the milliseconds that are mentioned in Flash Boys. But I thought I'd provide some technical background because it is complicated, but on the other hand, it's quite simple. This involves theft, really. I think the question that leaps out, the first question that leaps out from you with the book is, Ronan with the track record in telecoms and Brad working at this sleepy outpost of Royal Bank of Canada. And these two young guys in Wall Street. And I suppose the first question, Ronan, is, how did it take outsiders to reveal this? Fellas like yourself and Brad.
Yeah, thanks for having me at this event. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's a great question. I normally find myself talking to the trading community, and you have to get down a rabbit hole on how all of this works. So it's good to talk about this more anecdotally. I left college and got a job by an Irish guy in New York City in the telecom sector. I had no training on that, and I took on network engineering. And Fast forward about 15 years later, I got involved in high-frequency trading. So exactly what Simon is saying, these trades are happening in millionths of a second, and technology is involved. And I'd always wanted to work on Wall Street, and I got a job at the Royal Bank of Canada, liaising between the technology group and the business group. And I remember when I first started working on the trading floor, even there I was an outsider. I pulled out network maps, and I soon got the nickname from the traders. They used to call me Boxes and Lines Guy. And they did not mean that in a nice way. And when I met with Brad was a trader, but Brad was not a Boxes and Lines guy. And he was an old-fashioned person trader, right? He would take the phone and trade on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Trading's gone very technical. So Brad ran electronic trading at RBC and had no idea necessarily what he was running. So we kind of forged this relationship, and we developed a product at RBC that moved us from the 19th ranked execution quality broker to number 1. And I used to joke and walk around the trading floor and go, Boxes and Lines guy now, bitches, right? So it was always funny, right? But yeah, we were kind of both outsiders, but we came together and came up with this technology that solved an issue, but we only solved the issue for when clients traded with RBC. And many of the largest clients had to pay other brokers for services rendered. And they said, well, if you think of something bigger, something on a grander scale, we'll support you. And myself, Brad, and a couple of other guys put our heads together and decided to quit our lucrative jobs, which might have been a bad decision at the time and might still prove to be. But we left our jobs almost 3 years ago and built out this trading platform and ran into Michael Lewis, almost 2 years ago, and he thought we were kind of crazy and outsiders and ended up writing a story on it. Yeah.
But the one thing as well that you kind of jumps out from the pages is that why didn't other people spot that this was going on? Why didn't other people spot that once I press the order button, the price spikes? Why didn't other people see it? Because in the book, it comes across that a lot of people that you met had suspicions that there was something like this going on.
Yeah, still today, I meet with traders almost every day. And if you talk to traders, they'll tell you, you sit there and your portfolio manager comes and tells you, buy 100,000 shares of Apple or whatever the stock is. And you see 100,000 shares of Apple for sale at a price that you want to buy it at. And you press the button, and you usually will get 40 to 60% filled. And that 60% that you missed is now on sale a few pennies more. And people have come conditioned to it. So Brad was very frustrated with that, and he thought it was RBC, Royal Bank of Canada's technology, he thought it was crap, right? So we went and we sat with SAC Capital, who are a very big hedge fund and the biggest payers on Wall Street, and we traded with them one day using Goldman, Morgan, Merrill, whatever product it was. I'm not singling out any broker. And they all had the exact same issue. So I think there's a little bit of ambivalence on the street. And there's other people, I believe, who solved the issue. They just went and, when we solved the issue at the Royal Bank of Canada, before we were able to roll this out to the clients, they made us actually go to the proprietary trading group and make sure that what we had solved for didn't screw their strategies up. So maybe at other banks, they just weren't able to do it. I'm not saying we're the most intelligent guys in the world. I think other people solved it. It's just when you choose a fork in the road, you can either go one way or the other. And we chose to go, I think, moralistic compass. And I don't mean to sound fluffy, but we said if we do the right thing, there's value in doing the right thing. There's too many Me Too offerings in the brokerage community. When you go and you meet with these clients, they're just sick of brokers coming in and telling them about their latest and greatest algorithm, heat mapping, flux capacitor bullshit. They're just like, can someone give me something different? And we got there and said, listen, you see, when you try to buy something, it disappears. We've got something where it won't disappear. And that's what we proved.
I mean, one of the things that comes across as well, and Lewis is very clever to introduce the whole story with this, that it's so basic. You think that it's much more technical, that it's to do with stuff that we wouldn't really be able to get our head around. But ultimately, it's down to a pipe.
Yeah.
And how these high-frequency traders can get as close to the data center and the traders as possible. You're talking about them spending tens of millions of dollars for a question of feet in a data center.
Yeah, I mean, I always harpen back, and I think this was a little bit in the book, to my first high-frequency client. So this was 2004. It's 10 years ago. A lot of people only heard of this a few years ago. And I got a call from a prime broker at Barclays, and he said, I have a client out of Kansas City. They're called Bountiful Trust, and they have a big issue with their trading. And I'm like, well, what's the issue? And he says it's taking them 43 milliseconds. So a millisecond is 1/1000th of a second. It's taking them 43 milliseconds to send their trade from Kansas to New York, execute it, and get acknowledgement that that execution happened. And like in the back of my mind, I'm like, what the fuck's a millisecond, right? And of course, my voice said, oh, that's terrible, 43, right? So the biggest proponent of latency is what's called propagation delay. It's just That's a fancy word. It just says the distance away from the signal you are. If you're in Kansas versus New Jersey versus New York, you're further away from the signal. So we moved this guy's strategy to New Jersey. We put him in a data center in New Jersey and got his latency from 43 milliseconds to 3.9. And the guy was thrilled. And a week or so after he had deployed his platform in New Jersey, I guess he came to visit his computers. And I took him out to dinner. And I said, listen, I don't understand why you're so happy here. I know 3.9 milliseconds is faster than 43. And again, this is 2004. So he stated then, he said, put it this way. Running the same strategy in New Jersey that I had previously run in Kansas, in the first week of operation, I've made more money additionally on this strategy than to pay for your services for 18 months. We were charging him $30,000 a month at the time. Wow. It's like $400,000. I'll never forget it till the day I die, because I went proudly into my boss's office the next morning and told him this story. He's like, well, you should have charged him a lot more. But that sort of kicked it off. The value of a millisecond. It's, Lewis talks about people digging trenches between New York and Chicago, and as basic as it is, but if you can go as straight as the crow flies versus bouncing around cities, well, then the signal goes between the cities quicker than if you go windy. It's fairly basic, but there's a lot of technology beneath it.
As someone who covered the financial crisis back home in my past role before I moved over here, I'm fascinated by contrarians, these people who stand up or who are brave enough to stand up and say, and questioning the status quo. Tell me about the pushback and the flack that you've got from Wall Street, from what you guys are doing. I know there were scurrilous rumors spread around that you guys were backed by the Irish mafia.
Yeah, there was all kinds of stuff. Actually, I'll go back to that. So we launched as a trading venue October 2013. The real difference between us, there's a lot of difference from the technology side, but you have exactly what Simon was saying. There's 13 exchanges. There's actually 11 because 2 just shut down in the last few months. But there's 11 exchanges and 43 dark pools. So you have 56 odd venues. Everybody in the room, I'm sure, has heard of the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. Those 2 are publicly traded. The rest are all owned by broker-dealers or high-frequency trading firms. We set up our trading platform. We're still the only platform ever to be owned by the institutional investor. So we're owned by hedge funds and mutual funds, the originator of the order. That was the spirit of it. And when we came out, they call it the buy side. The buy side were very supportive of IEX, and the sell side, the brokers, were pretty resistant. They're kind of like, who the hell do you guys think you are, forcing us to connect to you? And like any kind of disruption, you have to use that to your advantage. So, yeah, we pissed people off at the beginning, and then, a book comes out and goes, and shits on everybody, and that doesn't help matters too much, but I've got a lot of lumps kicked out of me. But as we go around and people meet with us, they see our technology, they trade on us, they realize we have a rational approach. We're in the process now of becoming a fully fledged exchange with the SEC. And as of late, the broker-dealer community have really embraced us because they see us as the next wave of an exchange. The exchanges out there charge them a lot of money to trade on their venues. They charge them a ton for their market data for access to the exchange, and we give them everything for free. The only thing we charge the brokers is when they trade. If you trade, you pay a fraction of a penny every time you trade. That's the only cost. That's the way trading always was till the exchanges went for profit entities. So we've kind of gone backward in time with technology, and I'm not saying we're out of the woods yet. We get attacked quite a bit by some high-frequency firms, but for the most part now, 12 months later into operation, the discussion's gotten a little bit more rational. I was still getting shouting matches here or there, but it was absolutely bananas a year ago. Yeah.
Right. I get the impression you're somebody who can handle yourself, and your choice of language as well is interesting. At times, the book reads like a Roddy Doyle novel with some of the use of the F word.
I blame my dad. It's like a few days before the book came out, it leaked on the internet, and someone had taken a photograph of the table of contents, and I saw one of the chapters was called Ronan's Problem, and I'm like, oh shit, this is real, right? And I forwarded that on a text to my father, and my father in Dublin, instead of regaling me with how proud he was, son, and all this stuff, I just got back, what the fuck's your problem, right? So when I read that and I'm cursing in the book, it's like apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
No,
right?
It doesn't. Well, I like the way you were teaching some of your American colleagues Irish terms. Tosser, wanker, argy-bargy.
Yeah.
The whole point of the book as well is to be transparent. That's essentially what the book's about. Is that what this was about, is laying yourselves on the line and saying, this is us, these are our personalities?
Yeah, we're obviously not shy. And when we worked at a big bank, we were prohibited from saying a lot of stuff. So part of the reason we left too was just we wanted to get out and expose this for what it is. The entire Lewis gets on TV and says the market's rigged. You'll never hear anyone from our group saying the entire market's rigged. there are structural inefficiencies in the market that are purposely created for some and not others. So maybe slightly rigged, but the market's not rigged. We never say the market's rigged, but we wanted to get out there and have the ability to expose it. So bearing our souls to Michael Lewis, I always say to people, people go, what's it like to be in a book? And I say, you ever hear your voice on an answering machine and think you sound like a tool? You got to read about yourself in a book. You're just like, I kind of joke, I didn't prep this, but this was in my pocket on the way up. Someone asked me, and I read this last night at a talk I did, and I promise this was just here. I was on the subway, and someone asked me, what's it like to be in the book? And I remember I ran home to read my chapter and sat down on my bed upstairs, and my wife was pacing the kitchen, and the first line on Ronan's problem, because I skipped right to my chapter, says this: part of Ronan's problem was that he didn't look like a Wall Street trader. He had pale skin and narrow stooped shoulders, and the uneasy caution of a man who has survived one potato famine and is expecting another. I say, Jesus, what could possibly come next, right?
Well, you've been eating better since then.
Yeah, I've been porking up since March, I'll tell you. No one calls me a famine survivor anymore. Yeah.
How long did you spend with Lewis? He seems to have been around you guys for a long, long time.
Not as long as you would think. Maybe like a year, but he would disappear and then come back, and he'd ask you to go out for drinks and dinner, and like we were joking before this, how journalists and reporters try to get you to drink. And
not true.
Not Simon wouldn't do it. But I called it I would never have more than 2 beers around Lewis, because I found myself singing like a canary every time I talked to the guy. But he's really, really smart. He's really funny. He's really captivating. And he came around and he grasped things very, very quickly. Like a lot of this stuff that we do is very down a rabbit hole market microstructure. And you'll tell him something and you spout off a paragraph thinking you sound like a genius. And he goes, oh, it's just like that. And I'm like, shit, yeah, it is. It's like, thanks, right? And we just met with him. People think we sat with him the entire time. We were, ignorant as it sounds, pretty shocked the extent to which we wore the book, because I know he met with lots and lots of other people. And when I found out shortly before the book came how big of a portion of the book we wore, I'm like, how the hell did this happen? And he's like, look, as I went and met with people, he met with high-frequency firms, he met with the regulators at the SEC, at FINRA, he met with broker-dealers. He said a lot of roads, went back to what it is that you guys are doing. There's a lot of people complaining about U.S. equity market structure and high frequency in general all over the world in every asset class. And all we said, look, high frequency is not bad. There are strategies that some of them use that are bad for the market. And we've always said, and like Brad, our CEO, has a great analogy, and he's always like, it's kind of like if there's termites in the basement of your house. We're not saying blow the fucking house up. We're saying remove the termites. That's what we stand for. So the market's not rigged. Just remove the termites.
So, as well as entertaining as the book was, and a lot of people got a kick out of that, I mean, it rattled a lot of cages as well. You had investigations announced after the 60 Minutes piece went out, the book was published. How do you see those investigations playing out into high-frequency trading?
It's hard to say. I mean, BATS is an exchange, and they were just fined the largest fine in the history of exchanges on Tuesday of this week, and that was related to specific order types that were created for high-frequency trading firms. Barclays are being sued by the Attorney General. I know nothing more than what was in the press in that regard, so I'm not saying anything negative about them. And the SEC are investigating many of these broker-dealer-owned dark pools as well as exchanges. So the one thing we kind of say is the lump that we've taken out of the industry is we've brought a lot more transparency to the industry, and no one can argue that transparency is a bad thing. We're not out there saying force regulation on everybody, but a lot of this stuff has been brushed under the carpet for years. It's just worth taking a look at, and that's what's happening. I think you're going to see more and more of that. I don't think you're going to see people going away in handcuffs, but you will see change as a result.
You've done very well in this business. Knowing what you know, knowing what you've seen, and knowing how you've spooked people with how the markets work, how do you invest your money?
Well, I'm not allowed to buy stocks myself anymore because of all of the data that we see through. So I have a private wealth manager who manages my money. I'm definitely in the stock market. We're not trying to spook people away from investing. The irony of the book, I had thought, was, a few days after the book, some people were on TV saying, this is going to ruin investors' confidence. And I'm like, ruin investors' confidence? For the last 5 years, the market has been shitting itself, and people just get on TV and go, nothing to see here. Us high-frequency guys have you all taken care of, tighter spreads, more liquidity. And then we come out and say, there's some things are broken, and this is what we're trying to fix, and we're ruining confidence. So that's not the message whatsoever. The markets are way more efficient than they were 10 years ago. We're not advocating to go back to the old specialist systems where there was all kinds of real riggage going on. We're just trying to, correct the inefficiencies that exist. Technology makes every industry much better. There's no debating that. Just trying to make it a little bit better.
I don't know how we're doing for time, but I think maybe there might be one or two questions that we could take from the floor.
We're getting the X. Does that mean
are we
stop talking?
Oh, yeah, that's it. So, well, I think we'll wrap it up then. So I would recommend you all to read this book and to learn more about what Ronan and Brad are doing in IEX. It's a fascinating story, and please give it up for Ronan Ryan.
So, thank you very much. Thanks.